Tuesday, and welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy Chad Fellers, we have casual talk about the challenges and successes in medical affairs with the most exciting and impactful professionals in pharma. As always, we have another great one for you today, so stick around.
Welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. I'm your host, Chad Fellers, with my amazing, what other words, adjectives do I want to use? I'm not real sure, but nifty, we'll just go with that as well. Sidekick, Mary. How are you, Mary?
I'm terrific. How are you?
I'm good. I mean, this has been, had a good couple of weeks since our last conversation around team bonding. I have to say, I feel much more better connected, I guess, even with you from our conversations from that. So thanks to Sarika for the conversation that she led with us last week. A lot of good takeaways. Have not started the whole the walking meeting that she has done. That's a really cool idea, though. I can't wait to try to put that into play. So really excited about this week when we're thinking about and this really, I think, overlays this whole concept of team bonding, right? And I think a part of that is the culture that's been set, being the culture champions. We've talked a lot about that over the past year and a half now. And so today, I'm excited we get to talk about the criticality of culture, collaboration, and an environment of people development to cultivate high-performing teams. What does that mean? That is, that's going to be our topic today, and I can't wait to dig in with our guests. So with that, Mary, why don't you make an introduction and we can get going?
Absolutely. So we're going to welcome to the show Scott Conry. He is a PharmD by training. He's lived almost his entire life in the Chicagoland area. And the past 20 plus years, Scott has worked for several big pharmas across nearly every major therapeutic area you can imagine. For the last 10 years has been oncology. I had to actually look it up because I couldn't remember how long it's been since you and I have known each other. 2008. Whew. And that's when he was with a little company y'all may have heard of called Shearing Plow.
They were a company at the time, no longer.
Yeah. You youngsters out there may not know who they are. They're Merck now. So reaching the VP of Medical Affairs level, Scott's going to have just a ton to share with us. I will mention, because I said the Chicagoland thing, a few years ago, Scott, the fam, moved out to Colorado. Not too far from Red Rocks, I would guess.
I'm about 15 minutes via car and 20 minutes via bicycle. I usually pass it on my bike 3 times a week as well.
Well,
you must ride really fast.
That's
well,
exactly
it's downhill. And the speed limit by car is only like 30 miles an hour. So I do like 25 on my bike.
Okay.
Because it's coming back, it's uphill. So it's not as easy.
Make sure you wear your helmet.
And I guess we should mention, since he can ride his bicycle that fast, that Scott's also an accomplished triathlete. Isn't that right?
I have done a couple of full Ironmans, multiple half Ironmans. I won an Ironman and a half last year, and I have the Ironman World Championships in Nice, France in 2 months.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Is that going to be pretty hilly?
It is. It's crazy. You do the 2.4 mile swim in the Mediterranean, but the 112-mile bike you do in the Alps, you gain 8,000 feet in the Alps. And then your prize for finishing the 112-mile bike ride is you get to run a full marathon. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
Lucky you. Well, it's a good thing you moved to the mountains so you could get yourself acclimated. So anyway, welcome to the show, Scott. We're glad to have you. As we have been doing, and I don't do this very often, but I got to give Chad credit for this because he came up with this, one of the really good rapid fire questions I've been hitting people with. and I'm asking everybody because it's such a good question. And I think it tells people a lot about a person. So I got a couple.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mary?
No, about the idea. No. Mm-mm.
About the accolades? Yeah.
No.
Okay. All right, go ahead. The
All right.
question.
Yes, it was Chad's idea. Okay.
Okay.
So what would your walkout song be?
Oh goodness, it's funny you say that. I think what's most apropos to me, and it actually was our introductory song at our wedding, and I just saw them in concert 10 days ago, and they played this. Would be "Wherever I May Roam" by Metallica.
Metallica.
Yeah, and so I had very little input into like designing our wedding or reception. I let my wife do all of that. I said, let me pick some of the music out. So yes, we were introduced to "Wherever I May Roam" by Metallica, much to my wife's chagrin. Although 32 years later, she's still here, so I must have done something right. And I took her to see Metallica 10 days ago because I didn't want to go by myself. But what's interesting, if you look through my 26 years in pharma and my time with 6 different pharmaceutical companies, and the fact that 4 different reorganizations have impacted my role and led me to going to other places, "Wherever I May Roam" is really fitting for my career. It's very fitting.
My next question is because I know you are very proximal to Red Rocks. It was going to be, what is the best concert you've seen?
Oh, very good. That is good. Best at Red Rocks or just in my entire life?
Well, let's just say it in your whole life. Because I'm a music person. I gotta know, what's the best concert you've ever seen?
Wow, that's really a tough one. Because I've seen upwards of like 70 concerts in my life. It's like that's the way my son and I bond. He likes old heavy metal, and when I was giving a talk at his wedding a year ago, I went through and I counted all the concerts. We've been to 48 concerts in the last 15 years, the three of us have.
Wow.
Best concert, I would have to say, I'll go with Metallica. It was the second time I saw them. It was in Chicago in 1988. It was the And Justice for All tour. My buddy's mom worked for Ticketron when they were still a company. They don't exist anymore, but she got us 5th row to see Metallica. And Queensryche opened for them when they were for Operation Mindcrime. And then we had Metallica and Justice for All. And we were in the 5th row. So it was really a cool show.
So 88. So that's Jason Newsted playing bass, right?
That was the first album Jason Newsted was on. Very good.
Oh, I'm a huge Metallica fan. So
there you go. That was his first album. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, right on. The last question I'm going to ask you, which I think will be a really good lead into what we're talking about, is what is a book that you feel like has transformed the way you think about culture?
Oh, it's one of I love Marcus Buckingham. There's like 3 authors I absolutely love, and I've had the opportunity to see them speak at the same leadership conference. Marcus Buckingham, Simon Sinek, as well as Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. But the first management book I really read when I first became a people leader was First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. And it was the first time I was introduced to the concept of everybody on your team is different. They all have unique talents and skills, and treat them all as individuals. People say, well, treat everybody the same. Well, no, don't treat everybody the same, because everybody needs something different from you, right? And treat everybody different based on what their unique talents and skills are. And when you do that, and you invest in people and you care about people, they know you care about them as a human being and not just as an employee, you will get the best out of people.
That is awesome. I want to make sure everybody has access to that if they don't know that book. And that is such a great lead in to our episode. So I'll turn it over to you, Chad.
This is going to be a fun conversation. I can already tell. Servant leadership is a huge thing, Scott, that I pride myself on as far as the approach, and 100%. It would even be like the idea of, and I promise we'll get to your key takeaways, which is the most important part. Thinking about
that's one of my favorite books. Yeah.
Yeah, thinking about like even the interview process, right? So sometimes I'll get this question, or I've gotten this question in the past, like, what is your team missing that you need to fill, or what is it? And I might see something on a resume that says I was the Viva lead. Well, I'm not going to assume that that's something that's a gift that they want to do and they're passionate about, right? My job as a leader is to identify what their giftings are, help them discover if they need, and then put them in a position to thrive in that, right? So to your whole point about you can't, you can, um, you can just do a cookie cutter type model, but it's not going to have lasting success and impact, both from a personal and professional satisfaction, right? So I love what you're saying about treat each person like an individual. So let's get into this. So common practice here on our podcast is to start with key takeaways. That way, if they only have a few minutes in the car to listen to this and they want to pop it on back later, they can at least take something away about what the content's going to be. So with that, do you have some key takeaways for our conversation today you'd like to share?
Yeah, this is kind of a like a corny quote, which you've probably heard before, but like these people that they always say like people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care, right? And when people know you care about them as human beings, you'll be amazed at how hard they work and what they'll do. But if people believe that you look at them, and I've had managers who've done this with me, that you're a chess piece on a chessboard and you fill a role and that's your job to do that, right? And you only care about them based on the production they put out as an employee, you're not going to get a lot out of them. They're not probably not going to hang around a long time if they're really people that you want, right? I mean, keep people at the center of everything you do. And this has come back to bite me in the behind a few times in my career, but I'm okay with it. I look for the best in everybody. I mean, I absolutely look for the best in everybody. And sometimes I think where I've learned that I probably needed to be a little tougher from a coaching perspective on people because I'm always giving people the benefit of the doubt, right? So I always try to check myself at the door and catch that. But I think if you always look for the best in people, you're going to get the best out of them.
Scott, this is great. Thinking about showing individuals that you care. So can you talk a little bit about the components of culture that's created to set up the success we just discussed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is something that has taken on growing importance as I've moved in my leadership journey in my career. I can recall a time when I recruited a former colleague and friend to join a team that I was, and I was bringing her on board to like be one of my peers. And she's like, Scott, what's the culture like? And I'm like, I don't know. People are nice. I said, the stock listing, the stock price is great and they pay well. So, I mean, because I always thought culture is like some warm and fuzzy, it's like it's a nice to have, right? Um, and what's funny is she joined the company. And while she was in training, our manager left the company and I ended up moving into his role and I became her boss. So here I recruited her to be my peer and I became her boss. And I realized it was just an awful leadership culture. I mean, it was a toxic leadership culture above me. So, and I love to invest in my people. I love to know what are your challenges? What are the barriers that are getting in the way of success? However, I didn't have the opportunity to bring any of that feedback to my leaders because they really could care less. I actually had a quote from my boss's boss, and he said, Scott, you're not a leader, you're a manager. It's our job to define what the strategy is. It's your job as a manager to make sure your team executes it. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's an interesting take because I always kind of considered myself a leader. And we had a tremendous amount of turnover at the organization. I had two people quit on me in the same day. That was a really bad day. One in the morning, one in the evening. I actually cried. The second one quit on me because I love my people. I absolutely love my people. People ask me like, "What's the one word that defines your teams?" And I say, "Family." I think of my team as a family, and I think of myself as like a proud papa, if you will, right? So two of my kids chose to run away from home on the same day, and so I was so sick of exit conversations with my MSLs that said, "Scott, I should have left like a year ago." but I really loved working for you and I thought you were going to change it. But when I realized you couldn't change it, I needed to leave. And I looked in the mirror and I said, what the heck am I doing here? And I realized I couldn't change the culture, right? And so that's when I really understood. Number one, I felt what it was like to work in a toxic leadership culture, but I also saw how it impacted all of my people. And that's when culture became really one of the most important things for me as a leader. And it really is the foundation of the culture that I want my teams to have is really one of psychological safety, where they can come to me. And I moved from a first line leader to a second line leader to a third line leader, right? And the further you move up the ladder, if you will, the harder it is to maintain your finger on the pulse of the culture of your team, right? Because there's microcultures. You can espouse a certain culture as a third line leader, but if there's a first line leader on your team and they have a different style and the culture is very negative, that's a dicey thing to deal with, right? But one of the things I always pride myself on, and then the leaders that work for me, is we create an environment where people can come forward at any time with what's working well, but even more important, what's not working well. And I'm finding people come to me and say, Scott, I know you think that we should be doing X, Y, and Z, but it's not working. I'm in front of the customers every day, and this is why it's not working. And we really should do this, right? And if you don't create an environment where people can come to their leaders or come to their second line leaders or come to me and speak up, then we're not going to succeed as a team. And at the end of the day, it's about understanding what are the key needs of our customers that allows us to bring them information or gather information from that impacts patients at the end of the day, right? I've had the pleasure of working in oncology for 10 years, but I've worked in a number of other different disease states, right? And at the end of the day, we want to impact patients, right? But if we don't create an environment where people can feel empowered to come to their leaders with what works and what doesn't work, then we're not going to impact patients. And when people feel like they actually have a voice and they're empowered and they have a say in the direction of where the team is going, you'll be amazed at the performance of your team. But if you look at it from the perspective of, we need to hit certain measurables, certain deliverables, and that's your focus, and you don't listen to your team, then you're not necessarily going to hit the goals you're trying to achieve. I said a lot there, but.
No, I have a really good question on that, or I don't know if it's a good question. I hope you have a good answer for it anyway. So, have you come in, well, you mentioned kind of one where you came into an organization, moved into a leadership role, and it was the leadership above you that was creating some of the issues. And since we are leaders learn from leaders, let's learn from some of your experiences. Have you gone into an organization where you did have the power to, or power's maybe not the right word, but to initiate a culture shift that was not one of psychological safety and shifted into that kind of a culture? And also where you may have had to politically get your leadership on board where maybe they weren't already. That was a lot of questions, but hopefully you felt it.
Yeah, the second one's probably more difficult than the first one. But when I was in my last role leading all of oncology field medical, I was the fourth leader of the team in only 3 years since it had been rebuilt. And so they had a revolving door of leaders for a whole host of reasons. And I had hematology underneath me. I had solid tumor underneath me. I also had medical accounts and strategy and operations underneath me. So I had a team of about 50. But what was unique is how this team was built and just some of the unique situations around how it was built, right? So I joined the organization to lead the hematology team, and they were hired into the organization as members of GSK. But we also had our solid tumor team, and they came from a different company that had been acquired. So many of them had been in a different environment and had a different sort of culture than the organization we were in. And then the medical accounts team was started brand new at a time, and they actually had overlapping customers. So they would talk to some of the same customers as the MSLs, and the MSLs didn't know why they were inside talking to their customers. And all of this, the merger with the second company and the start of this medical accounts team all took place in March of 2020. And so it was a time when we just kind of shut the doors and we told everybody they couldn't leave their house for a year and a half. And so people never like spent time with each other. There was no team building. And then there was a whole host of different leaders. So when I took over as the head of the organization, there was just a deep dive need to do team building from the ground up. First with the leaders, first and foremost, because the leaders, all of them individually were very talented leaders, but many of them looked at their role through the silo of, this is my team. These are my 8 people. I'm responsible to them, but they didn't necessarily look at their leader peers and say, wait, we're a leadership team, and we're a team of leaders that need to work together to say what's best for oncology field medical, right? So we started with the leaders, but then we also did a deep dive from a team building perspective with all the individuals in the field. And so it took quite a while to really build the type of culture we wanted in the organization, but I was really happy with where they were, and they were performing very well. I had done that. That really was what my role was and what my job was. It was really to get that team performing really well, and they were. But your second question, Mary, I think was a little around, if you have a leader who doesn't necessarily espouse the same type of culture and they report to you, how do you deal with that? And that's really tricky, for lack of a better word, right? Because when I was a third line leader, I would have like monthly open check calls on Fridays once a month where people could just join at any time. I'd cover like 2 topics, but then it'd be kind of a free for all, ask me anything, we would talk. Even though I had a team of 50 in the summer, I would have like summer chats with Scott, or I would have a one-on-one with all 50 people, every single one of them, just so, and there was no agenda. I just wanted to talk to every one of them. So they know they could connect with me at any time. And sometimes people on, one of the teams would come to me and say, hey, I think I'm having trouble with my leader, right? For X, Y, and Z reasons. And I would always redirect them to that individual. Have you talked with your leader first and foremost, right? But then try to understand it a little bit better. I would also ask them to be transparent if they felt comfortable that they talk to me as well, right? Because that would make it much easier for me to sit down with the leader and say, just kind of tell me what's going on in the team or with this individual and what have you. And there's always 2 sides to every story. But that's not an easy situation to deal with.
Just thinking about a couple of things. Number one, a team of 50, which that's a very large team. And being in oncology, very competitive as well too. How do you balance competition in a healthy way, but maintain a high performing culture?
Yeah, it's one of my like pet peeves. I'm like uber competitive in my personal life. So, I do all types of crazy ultra marathons. I do Ironmans, and I'm like crazy competitive. I want to do the best I can. I always want to win. But I hate competition in the workplace because we're all on the same team, for goodness sake. All of us have the exact same goal, right? We are trying to impact patients, right? And bring value to our customers. And if we work together and we collaborate and we help each other, all of us will be successful. And so I think it's trying to, lay the foundation of like, what's our unified mission and where are we trying to go as a team? And in doing that, it's not always about like a flowery mission statement. Those are fine. But bringing everybody together and making sure that they're a part of defining what your mission is and your vision is. Like, where are we going as a team? I want you to provide input and let me know, where do you think we need to go? And getting everybody to commit to where we're going. And then also creating ground rules, right? So what are our team norms? Like what are we going to do? What are we not going to do, right? And competition is one of them. I think, Chad, you had talked about this earlier. You had talked a little bit about like when you're hiring people, right? And hiring for certain people. For me, I've worked in so many different therapeutic areas. And I used to lead MSL training at Sanofi, God forbid, 23 years ago, a long time ago, right? And people would say, oh my gosh, do you need someone who has like deep therapeutic knowledge? And I'm like, well, it's fine. If they have deep therapeutic, great. But, if it's an MSL, I really want someone who's got like the talents and skills to engage customers, build relationships, right? It's an externally facing role. But I also want people that are a cultural fit for the organization, that collaborate really well, not only with their teammates within medical affairs, but all their teammates within the organization, um, and make the team stronger, right? I want great teammates, right? Because if we help each other succeed, we're all successful. I hire for those skills. I can teach anybody the medicine, right? Yeah. Anybody can learn the medicine, but even to this day, and I know, Mary, in your role, right, because you deal with so many external clients, right, who define hiring guidelines for you. They'll say, I need people that know the therapeutic area. And I'll tell anyone who'll listen, I'm like, if they have it, great. But I really want someone who has the talent and skills I want is a really good teammate. That's what I want. And that helps build the culture if you hire the right people.
That's right.
With that sort of mindset.
That's actually a debate that would be probably really interesting to have. You never know whenever I'm talking to a new company what they're going to say.
And it's also a good mix too. And Chad, this as leading teams too, right? Is you want people that complement each other on your team. Yeah. You want people that bring different things to the table, right? So you don't want to hire a new team of 10 people who are all new, never been to industry and don't know the therapeutic area. That'll be a little difficult from day one, right? But if you have a veteran team, then you can bring a new person on board knowing they have the right support on the team, or vice versa. If you do have a newer team, then you might say, ooh, I kind of need a veteran to come onto this team who's going to be able to help these folks, right? It's all about the right mix as well.
So we can say in one hand that we're not competing against one another, but yet we are grading on a bell curve in ways too. So someone's going to exceed expectations and the rest are going to meet expectations. So one of the things that I did though was with KPIs, right? So I shifted more of the teamwork and collaboration to a higher percentage of what they're going to be evaluated on at the end of the year performance, not just the number of engagements that they've had and number of projects, but so that's one is really putting money where my mouth is when I really want to promote others. And then another thing I did is on our team calls, we had a section of the call where it really is a culture shout out type of thing, where it was an opportunity for teammates to share best practices and things like that of what other teammates had done, right? So it's not about what they did, but is recognizing their team for the great work that was done and efforts of how they advanced them in their territory or this, that, and the other. But once people buy in, I mean, the magic that can happen is truly phenomenal as far as how far a team can really elevate and really make that impact that everybody wants to do, right? So it's just a process, but I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I worked in an organization where you got a rating for how well you performed on your objectives, but then there was also a rating on your values and behaviors. And so you got a score for each one. And we as leaders, we would talk. So I'd much rather have somebody who, if they're going to be a little deficient in one area, it's in like just the X's and O's of the objectives. But man, if they perform well in the values and behaviors, what you find is those people are revered by their teammates because they're like, oh man, I can always pick up the phone and call Janet because she will always help me with this. And right. And I love that. No one listens to me on this subject, but I've been trying to push the boulder up the hill to do away with performance ratings at the end of the year. There's certain companies that do that. The pharmaceutical industry has not endorsed that, however.
I suspect if you bring that up, you're going to hear like a gasp and then maybe a pin drop.
Yeah. I mean,
That's too much of a paradigm shift.
To do away with performance ratings, right? You still will have top performers who maybe they'll get a slightly higher merit increase or a slightly higher bonus because they perform better, right? And then you'll have some people who maybe they're struggling a little bit in the role for a whole host of reasons, right? And maybe they're a little bit lower on the scale, if you will. But you're not labeling somebody, right? I worked at an organization where not only did they only let like 10% of the total group become exceeds expectations, they wanted us to find 5% to put in the bottom bucket. And you labeled them. This was the best part. You were labeled a missed performance. Boy, that feels good, doesn't it? And at times you'd have, oh my God, this was like the gnashing of teeth and the fighting with my leaders, because they're like, hey, all of my people, no one's like missing performance. So yeah, there's a continuum of how well they perform. And we'd be like, well, I'm forced to find 4 people. So we're going to find 4 people. And then you're at the end of the year, you're telling an individual, you missed performance. It's like, boy, that feels wonderful, doesn't it? Whereas you could still give out the same degree of merit, bonus, what have you, across the spectrum without doing performance evaluations. Number one, you wouldn't have people fighting for the exceeds expectations who become bad teammates because they want to beat their teammates. And then you also don't have people feeling like they're missing their performance. It's an awful way to treat people, in my opinion, but no one listens to me.
That's got to stink for the director who has like developed this awesome culture and this team of rock star performers that you have to pick the worst of the best. I don't know what you say that.
And it's a financial thing sometimes, right? Yeah. And that's what it comes. They're viewing it as what I can't pay out to everybody, so you have to focus. And I mean, I've even had ideas of like, what if you just give me the pot of money and then we split it across the team? If I've got a high performing team and they're all high performing, why don't we just split it equally across the entire team? I mean, right? I mean, so there are different ways to think about this. We're so fixed on just like, how do we provide value and demonstrate value and those types of things. It's relying on reach and frequency oftentimes. These are old models that we have to really reconsider at some point. So anyway, I didn't mean to take too much of the time on that, but I thought it really is. I mean, when you're thinking about culture and high performance and the expectations in a competitive market, with people that are driven, how do you balance that? And I think it's just it's an interesting conversation to have.
When you were talking about scoring behaviors.
Yeah.
I always kind of have a hard time going, okay, when you look at something that, I mean, it's not vague, but I mean, how do you score that? And, I was also thinking about, like we put a metric on everything, it seems like, and we were talking about this actually, in the last meeting with Sarika, that your team's dynamic, their vibe can really drive the overall success and performance of the team, right? But if you're only going to evaluate based on the behaviors, like how do you score that?
Yeah, not easy. It is subjective in nature, right? And at this organization, we have like 5 or 6 like culture pillars, right? And we ask for examples within each culture pillar. But in addition to that, we also would poll their counterparts and their peers in the organization who they worked with. So not only within their team, within field medical, but also who is their commercial counterpart or maybe market access or headquarters people that they work with, right? So we tried to gather feedback from all the people that they worked with, and also have them, give examples as well. Usually you knew who the people were that had on the values and behavior side who scored really well. That's not as, believe it or not, even though it's subjective in nature, that's not as difficult to measure as it is the objective parameters. Because, and this, Chad, right? You give your team a metric to hit. Believe me, people will find a way to hit a number. It doesn't tell you if there's any value behind the number, but they'll find a way. And sometimes people have like crazy inflated numbers, and you're like, yeah, but I don't know that person's bringing the most value to the organization, right? Yep. But the values behaviors, even though it's subjective in nature, usually you knew. Yeah. For lack of, I know that's very scientific, Mary, but you just kind of knew.
The Tyranny of Metrics. It's an amazing book. It really is. It's really, you give somebody a number, they're going to hit it. Right.
How do you go about, especially being, the several levels up in leadership, help kind of foster that collaboration across other silos within the company, who what they're hoping to accomplish in their silo is different from what you're hoping to accomplish, but you want them to all work together for a common goal that may not be exactly the same common goal.
Yeah, it can be challenging, right? When you look at whether it is my internal stakeholders are often the, vice president of sales or the vice president of market access, right? And they have their own deliverables, right? The sales teams, they have a number to hit, right? They have a number, sales number, which it's always funny because, MSLs, around metrics, like, oh my gosh, there's so much pressure on me to hit this number. I'm like, you think there's pressure to work on the sales side of the business? I just says, we don't have pressure. Salespeople have more pressure, or market access, and they're measured by, products on formulary and tiering and what have you, right? But at the end of the day, we all have the exact same job. All of us do, right? We want to impact patients. All of us do. We may be measured differently. However, we all have the same goal. And one of the things that, and this is why collaboration is so important to me, is that within medical affairs, we need to understand what is our role in supporting the commercialization of our compounds. We're not commercial. We don't sell. That's not what we're measured on. But our role in medical affairs is unique, right? It's multifactorial. We play a role often in early development and pipeline and research. We also play a key role in disseminating new clinical information, engaging customers around our marketed compounds, right? And that supports the commercialization of the compounds. And working with all of our cross-functional partners, one of the things is being very intentional on the value we bring to the organization. So one of the things I used to do with my commercial leaders is at least twice a year, I would join one of their leadership calls, and I would walk through what my MSL objectives are for each one of the brands and what we're doing and what we're going to be communicating, the status coming out at ASCO. So we're going to engage these customers in the next 3 months and share this information. And you'd be shocked that the commercial people are like, oh my God, I didn't know you do that. I didn't know you do that, right? But just being intentional and sharing like what your team does and how they contribute to the success of the organization to ultimately impact patients goes a long way. But I would, at every level of my organization, so my leaders in the field, I wanted them to have routine, regular touch points with every one of their sales leaders to talk about what are the key accounts, what are the challenges, what are we doing, how can we as medical support and help, right? But also be intentional about who are the customers we see and what are our objectives. And then at the field level, the MSL should be closely engaged with their sales counterparts in a compliant, appropriate way, of course, to talk about like what we're doing in the account, who we're seeing, what are the challenges. One of the things you're seeing a lot now is cross-functional account management, and coming together to look at an account and look at all the different people who touch that account. Medical affairs, market access, there's account managers, there's salespeople, and there's some of these accounts depend on the therapeutic area. There's like 6 people touching the exact same customer, right? And all the customer knows is you work for this company, right? And it's what does the customer need from us? And how do we partner as a team to bring value to that individual? But looking at the key accounts and saying, like, what are the headwinds? What are the tailwinds? What are cross-functional objectives? And how do we work together to hit those objectives? And it might be a situation where, like, I had the pleasure of launching the first sickle cell drug in 20 years when I was at Novartis leading their hematology teams. And the challenge when we launched that drug was not the clinical information, it was reimbursement, because about 70% of that patient population was Medicare, Medicaid. And the most important thing was to connect the sites with like the reimbursement managers, right? And the state reimbursement agencies, et cetera, right? But if they come to an MSL with that feedback. The MSL can't go, well, that's not my job. I'm the science guy. I can't help you there. No, you need to connect them to the right person, right? And so and when your commercial counterparts see that you are all one team, we have a different role, but we're all one team committed to the same goal, you find that like competition, it goes away for the most part. There's always a few people here and there probably always will be, but for the most part, people really work well together.
Yeah, it's a mindset of granting trust versus earning trust as well too. When you grant it and then show that, you earn others, and I think that's one of the challenges that I see is across industry is we're so silo focused. Project management, I got to get mine. I've got to be able to check it off the list instead of being able to. You said something earlier that really struck me, right? We all have objectives that are aligned with the company needs, but what you said earlier was understanding what the provider what the KOL's needs are, right? So that's a different focus. That's looking at somebody beyond yourself to truly be able to bring that value. We all serve different functions, but we have to work together in a symbiotic relationship. So
yeah, you just touched on something, Chad, that I forgot all about. But like when we launched this sickle cell drug, one of the things that we did, our MSL team, we were in the field a good 2 years pre-launch, similar to a field medical team. And then they built the commercial team maybe 6 months before it was launched. But myself and the head of that commercial team, she was a wonderful leader and just a great collaborator. But we brought our leaders together very early on to say, we're going to launch this drug with an account management focus. And the MSLs, we've been out in the field for a couple of years. We know the key accounts and who the key people are. So we're going to introduce the commercial people so you know who they are. But then we're going to look at the top accounts where there's the greatest potential. We're going to tier them and then we're going to engage, obviously, the top tier accounts first. But instead of the traditional, well, the MSLs have these 60 customers. You need to see them all in 30 days. And then the salespeople, you have these 100 customers. You see all of them in 30 days. Well, they're the same people, and you're fighting with your counterparts to go see the same people. Yeah. We had our teams, and we pulled it through from a leader level all the way down to the field level, look at each individual accounts, and they started having account meetings pre-launch to say, when we launch with all the different customers in this account, who should go see who first? Does it make sense for the MSL to engage this person? How about the salesperson? Gosh, you know what? They know the data really well, but they've already told us that reimbursement. Well, let's get the reimbursement person in there first, right? And so we didn't care about like metrics. Did you see your 60 people in X amount of days? And it was a very successful launch. Really, at the end of the day, that's the measurement of success. It's not whether you hit some arbitrary metric.
I know one of the things that you've said is people development needs to be a strategic imperative. It needs to be the thing that drives everything. So some or many organizations, they treat people development as kind of like a checkbox rather than like a strategic driver. That's clear that's not your philosophy. Can you kind of share with our listeners how you kind of go about strategically developing people on your teams? And, how has that really kind of shown up for you on a job?
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, developing people makes me feel good. So I love to help people, especially people who are like passionate about like moving into this new role. Like I want to be a medical director someday, or I want your job, Scott, or I want to do this, right? I love to work with them on their development and give them a part to, an opportunity to be a part of like a certain task force, a certain team where they are able to assimilate certain skills or interact with people. I love to network with people to help them get where they want to go, because the greatest compliment you can have as a manager is you have someone who wants to move into some new role and you partner with them on their development, and then they leave your team. And a lot of people are like, oh no, I can't leave that. I can't lose that person. That's my top person. It's like, yes, you can. We're all replaceable. All of us are replaceable, right? But if if that individual moves into another role, not only does it make you feel good as a manager, but it also pays the organization back. And it's multiplicative, if you will, right? Because now you have an individual who they've worked in different roles. And when they move into this new role, they have such a broad perspective because they've worked in different departments, right? And they bring so much more to that role. But in addition to that, you cultivate the top talent in the organization, because if you have individuals who are really passionate about development, and you know this, Chad, from leading teams, not everybody's passionate about development. You'll have certain people on your team that are like, okay, I have to have a development plan. I'll read this book and attend this webinar, right? They see it as like an assignment, and that's okay. But if you have people that are really passionate about their development and their growth, and you help them grow and move into another role, it pays back the organization, because those are your future leaders of the organization. But in addition to that, if you don't support their growth and development, and listen, each individual employee has to own their own development, right? A manager can't develop someone who has no desire to be developed. But if you don't help them in their growth and their development, they're going to leave your team anyways. They're going to leave your team and go to another organization where they feel like they can grow. I had a manager I worked for, and our development conversations consisted of 30 seconds at the end of my end of year review where he would say, Scott, how do I develop you? That was the nature of development. And so I took it upon myself to try to grow and develop in the organization. And I was very transparent with him about what I want, where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And he gave me the green light to go ahead and do it. I had no support from him. However, his boss got wind of me talking to other people in the organization about future opportunities. And he came to me and said, Scott, why do you want to leave my team? That was the feedback I got around my own development. Needless to say, I left that organization. But it's good for people. It's good for the organization. And, it makes you feel good. I'll never be able to help some of the fabulous leaders I work for who helped me grow and develop and took a chance on me and put me into stretch roles where I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that job. But if I can help others, then you get to pay it back. And so it's really about, having open conversation with every single person on your team about, like, where do you want to go? Have you thought about what you want to do? And often people don't even know where they want to go, but you see something in them and you observe something where you're like, have you ever thought of this? I actually inherited an MSL. I inherited a whole new team in a reorganization, and I had an MSL. She had been in an MSL for like 10 years. She was a really good MSL. And like in the first couple of months, I was managing her in our one-on-ones. I asked her about her growth and her development and where she wanted to go in her career. And she's like, Scott, no one's really talked to me about this at all. And I'm like, that's sad. And she told me about like some of the projects she was working on. And one of the things I could tell really early on is she had a great read of people. She understood people really well, and it's why she was so good with her customers as well. And I asked her, I said, do you ever want to be a people leader? I said, you have a lot of like skills and traits that'd be like a really good people leader, and you're really compassionate too. And she's like, God, Scott, it's funny you say that, because I've always harbored a desire to lead people, but no one's ever asked me whether I wanted to lead people. And I'm like, okay, then, well, we're going to work on that. And so as luck would have it, 3 months later, I got promoted to a second line leader, and I was her manager's manager. And one of the managers on my team, he took a developmental opportunity because he wanted to move into a compliance role. So we got him into like a 6-month compliance rotation, which was really interesting for a field medical leader. He wanted to go into compliance, which was cool. And compliance loved him because there were no medical people in compliance. So, and so I put her in his role for 6 months, and I would have calls with her every week. And we would talk about how it's going. And she was like, oh my God, Scott, I didn't realize, I have to babysit some of these people, and they're seem less mature than my 9-year-old at home. And I'm like, welcome to leading people. She not only moved into a first line leader role, she's now a second line leader at that company. And I look back and I'm like, and I just smile because I played a small role in helping her develop into a people leader, and I kind of identified it early on. And so those are the things I just love about people leadership. It's probably more selfish than anything else.
Scott, you were saying earlier on about how it gives you like these proud papa moments. which is actually what I refer to them too. One of my um, uh, dearest friends and one of my favorite hiring managers of all time is a guy named Dave Dawson. And I used to always describe him as like the proud papa, because he would talk about all of these people who had grown up under him, who are now above, like have gone beyond where he's been.
Yeah.
I see that in you, and I see that in Chad as well. Um, that um, that you are like, you do kind of have like that proud papa thing. And the other thing that you said, Scott, which also reminds me of Chad. Chad, I don't want you to have a stroke that I'm complimenting you
This is
this the third
great,
time today.
Scott.
I
I'm so
know.
glad you came on. This is awesome. It's a
But
rarity.
the ability, this, I think this is the sign of a great leader, is the ability to see um growth and potential in somebody that they don't even see themselves. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people in senior leadership, they just say, well, if they don't ask for it, then I'm not giving it to them. It doesn't show they really want it. I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think sometimes it takes a great leader to believe in them and show them the greatness within them that they didn't even know was there. So kudos to both of you.
Sometimes people need a kick in the behind.
True.
I don't know if you ever read the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I love that book. It's a great leadership book. It's written from the perspective of the challenges women face in becoming senior leaders in organizations. And one of the things she talks about in the book is that, and this is a generalization, right? This isn't for everybody, right? But that in general, men might be more gung ho to jump into a role that maybe they feel like they may not be suited for, but they're like, I'll figure it out, right? They're more aggressive. They're like, I'll don't take that role, and I'll be in. And women may be more reserved to say, gosh, I don't know that I have the experience. I don't know that I can do that. And what's funny is in that example, I actually identify with the women. I've always been one that I'm like, oh, I don't know that I can do this role. I'm not comfortable. I don't have the skills. And I actually look, the most amazing leader I ever worked for was a woman who, she was very much the antithesis of that. She'd jump into any role under the sun. She actually led an HEOR team when she had no HEOR background at all. She's like, I'll figure it out. I can lead people. And she's super confident. She's an amazing leader. And but I told her, we were having this conversation on this topic, and I said, I might need you to kick me in the behind one of these days because I might hesitate to move into a role. And she was the first one that promoted me into a second line leader role. And when the role opened up, I'm like, I don't know. I said, I love being a first line leader. I feel like I'm a good parent, I'm like, not with my own children. They tell you something different, but my teams, I'm like, I feel like that first line leader is my sweet spot. I love being like the proud parent and knowing what each one of them does really well and understanding their key customers and where I can help them. But boy, second line leader is a different animal. Now, all of a sudden, your customers are not your MSLs. They're your cross-functional senior leader partners. I don't do well in the room with sharks. I'm not super aggressive. I like to just be a teammate and be, how do I help everybody else out, right? But she said, no, oh yes, you can do this role. And I interviewed, I was fortunate enough to get the role. And then she helped me grow into the role. It's one of the best things I ever did. And then someday I became a third line leader. So it's, when people identify something in you that you don't necessarily even see, it's a sign, I think, of a great leader as well.
I think that's honestly, that's one of the reasons why we started MSL Lead Chronicles in ways, right? So, I mean, I think that what happens, Scott, so often is you have high performing MSLs that just kill it in their region, and then the companies automatically promote them, think, oh, then I can just replicate this across team. And they come into this role and they don't know how to lead. They don't know that their priorities shift, right? Instead of it being an external focus, now their main customer is their team. That should be that shift. If it's not there and the investment in them, you can't have that multiplier effect. I think it's perfectly fine that you mentioned that you're a little bit selfish about that. I am too. I mean, I love, and I tell people this in the interview process, like, I'm more invested in the person than the role itself. The role will take care of it. If you invest in the person, and create that it's about creating a legacy as well too, right? I want to create a lasting legacy that helps impact and influence others. And I'm nothing but encouraged by the words that you shared and some of the reflections on that. So I think as we start to wrap up our time, where do you want to wrap up this conversation for our listeners?
Gosh, I don't know. Where do I want to wrap up? I'm in an interesting place in life currently, right? And so, in the past, how many years? 5+ years, I've been reorganized out of 2 leadership roles I never would have left, right? Places I'm like, yep, this is where I'm staying until I retire, right? And the rug was torn out from under me actually 2 weeks from one role 2 weeks before we moved into our new house in the mountains in Colorado. That was a slightly tough time, especially telling my wife, hey, the big house we built in the mountains, the one that we went way over budget on? Yeah, well, I don't have a job anymore, so we're in trouble. There was that one, and then the most recent one at the end of last year. So, I started my own consulting company, and right now I'm building a medical affairs department for a small pharmaceutical organization. I'm also partnering with another medical affairs consulting company where I'm doing leadership development because that's my passion. I love leadership development. So, but I'm at a stage in my career where I can, the light at the end of the tunnel, I can see it. Hopefully it's not an oncoming train, right?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I can see the end, right? And so when I think of, gosh, if I look back, and I think, Mary, you mentioned this to me in like one of our communications, like what would I tell my like early self, like about my career? What advice would I give? And this is it's not very profound, so I'll just warn you in advance. But I would say you just enjoy your career journey. It's not about the destination, right? Because it doesn't matter what your title is. Enjoy the journey, enjoy all the people you get to meet and the people you get to work with, right? When I think of all the different roles I've had in different organizations I've been at, you mentioned this, Chad, I think earlier, right? Every job has its challenges, right? Every job's got its warts, right? But boy, you don't forget the great people you work with, right? So, enjoy the journey. And I think I would tell myself, like, in the end, it's going to be okay, right? It'll be all right. It doesn't matter like what your title is, because if you can leave a lasting impact on people, then I feel like I've done my job.
So anywhere I roam, where I lay my head is home.
That's right. And unfortunately, that's true for me. Yes.
That's a great tip. And I think that's something I'm going to focus on for the coming week is where can I find joy in the things that I'm doing, and being satisfied for the day and not being so caught up in what's going to happen for tomorrow or what I can earn. It's like what is available for me today that I can recognize and appreciate. Scott, that was really good encouragement.
And that's better than Enter Sandman as your.
So do you have? So I'm curious. Do you have the lullaby rendition of Metallica?
A lullaby rendition.
Yes, Liam listened to Baby Metallica. He listened to Baby Metallica, Baby Wilco.
Yeah,
Baby Radiohead. Yeah, it's really good. It's real. I mean, it's all like xylophones and stuff. I still have it. I'll send it to you.
Check it out.
Hey, I've been listening to Metallica since like 1985 when they were considered like very hardcore. And like the only people that listen to Metallica, you're like, oh, you listen to Metallica. Oh my God. I had hair at the time, right? I was in high school. And, but then they crossed over and became much more mainstream, obviously, but still a fan.
Love it. Scott, thanks so much for taking some time just to have conversations, sharing experiences as a leader. I think that there's a lot of great takeaways that our listeners, I know I can take away, and I know that our listeners will too. So thanks for making yourself available. Look forward to hearing about your next concert experience. I
do. I'm going, what's today? Tuesday, right? I'm going Friday. My son's coming to Denver and we're seeing a band called Baby Metal. And so it is strangest band on earth, but I've seen them once before with my son. It's a mixture of people who love anime or heavy metal. It's a fusion of Japanese pop and heavy metal, and it's one of the most wildly entertaining bands you'll ever see. And Mary, you're nodding your head like you know who they are.
Because my daughter likes baby metal.
There you go. Yeah, so I'm going to see them Friday night with my son.
Leaders
Very
really do
fun.
learn from leaders. I have learned something new about a new genre of music that I am not
So
familiar with. So
Jenna doesn't listen to Metallica?
No, she is into K-pop. That's about her extent.
What? Maybe she'd like baby metal.
Yeah,
Maybe-
they're J-pop
maybe so.
and metal. They're wildly entertaining. They
Oh
really
my
are.
gosh. This
Yeah.
is great. This is great. Scott, thanks so much for joining. Listeners, thanks so much for tuning into another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles. Remember, leaders don't develop in isolation. Leaders learn from leaders. So with that, lead well, identify areas to find joy this week, and we will see you on the flip side.